Escalating geopolitical tensions and shifting global capital flows are heightening uncertainty for African economies, tightening access to financing, disrupting trade, and also exposing gaps in risk management frameworks. Yet insurance penetration across the continent remains low, limiting the capacity to absorb external shocks and build durable economic resilience. As Africa Reinsurance Corporation marks 50 years, its group managing director and CEO Corneille Karekezi, who was recently appointed in February as the third chair of the Alliance of Multilateral Financial Institutions, joins me now to discuss how insurance can play a more central role in mobilizing capital, de-risking investment, and also strengthening Africa's financial buffers in an increasingly volatile global landscape. Thank you so much for your time today, Corneille, and interesting times that we're in. And I see that you're a man with many hats there, but let's get into, what we're seeing play out globally. We're seeing the world rising, with rising shocks. We're also seeing risk almost at increasing levels here. But speak to why insurance institutions right now are critical, especially for Africa.
Yeah, thank you very much. Insurance is extremely critical, as we have heard in the news about marine insurance in the Hormuz Strait, but also in Africa, because most of imported goods of Africa are now at risk at a certain area or ways in the waterways today. So prices are going up, and this will add up to the oil prices, which are up, and you can understand how the ripple effect will be on inflation. So this is one of the main impacts which Africa will have, and also there are some countries of Africa who are losing revenues, like Egypt, for example, with the Suez Canal, which is not used properly today. But in all, I think this is a reminder that Africa should really focus on itself, its self-development, its self-destiny. And Africans share a lot, destiny, but also fragility. So fragmented market of Africa should be consolidated so that we can really have a weight as well, like any other part of the continent in the world.
Talking about focusing on ourselves now, let's look at the journey for Africa Re. 5 decades in works now. Let's look at the journey so far and the milestones.
So Africa Re was created 50 years ago. This year we are going to celebrate our 50th anniversary. So it is more than a milestone. It is not because we have survived, but we have had a huge impact. Currently, Africa Re has 20% of the market share in African reinsurance industry. We are leading, and we have built a company which is credible at A rating, which is a rating which with the S&P, which is held by very few in the world, especially in the southern part of the hemisphere. So Africa Re has impacted the economies of Africa by developing the insurance and the reinsurance industry, by building capacity, but more importantly, by being a relief in terms of shocks. When shocks happen, like these ones, which is happening, and all the shocks we have been at the forefront, including during COVID, including during many disasters, I can mention many, which have happened in terms of natural event, in terms of hit on a critical infrastructure on the continent, and including riots, including political violence, and so on. So we have allowed investors to feel safe and invest on the continent, but we have retained premium, insurance premium on the continent, which was our first mission. And those funds which are retained on the continent are reinvested in our economies in different instruments to support all the gaps we have, naming infrastructure, agriculture, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, because as a man with many hats, looking at one of the roles that you play as the third chair of AAMFI, recent years we've heard quite a lot about, the global financial architecture and making it work for Africa, and from where you sit, how can we strengthen Africa's financial architecture and make it more fit for purpose for Africans?
So we have looked at that critical issue. There are two ways. One is to mobilize financial resources internally, because yes, the external world can contribute, but you can't rely on it permanently. And often it comes with conditions. That's why we are talking about sovereignty. So we should mobilize our own financial resources. We have found that resources is trapped in many countries, and it is fragmented, and it's not consolidated to become meaningful. For example, for large infrastructure, large energy plants, and so on and so forth. So that's first one. We have to consolidate whatever we have as Africans, which is a lot. It's almost $400 billion US dollars trapped in insurance companies alone on the continent. But it's not efficiently deployed. So number one, it's to mobilize. Number two, is to find ways to create meaningful vehicles where those funds can be channeled safely, and also to create a structuring and integrating system and outcome for the continent.
Yeah, because we're talking about a world where there's quite a lot of uncertainty right now, and mobilizing long-term capital can be a tricky business in these times. And also, when you also look at it, juxtapose that with managing risk as well. But let's speak to the work ahead for Africa.
So the work ahead is, again, it's first of all, we have to align whatever resources we have with our priorities. That's number one. And those priorities have been identified to be the one which are bringing regions and economies together. Yes, each country can manage its risks separately. Each country can try to develop its own economy separately, but we have found that to be inefficient, because even if you have become a champion in your country, you need space to grow. You need diversification of risk. In insurance, for example, there is no one risk. That's why the majority of premium incomes are going outside the continent, because the risk is not diversified and disseminated in the continent, because each country is linked to its former colonizer, okay, or foreign market. And we forget that a risk which is in Nigeria, for example, there is a capacity to insure it in Egypt, in Kenya, in South Africa, but those capacity are not pooled together. And Africa has been created exactly to do that. And we have been doing that for the last decade. That's why I mentioned 20% leadership. And we are leading even our competitors, European competitors who are on the continent, who, when Africa was created, there was no one to compete with those foreign overseas companies. But now, here we are, 50 years, African capacity, and also African-led infrastructure. Because when those funds goes out the continent, they go to develop other economies. So they don't stay here in Africa.
No doubt, African-led infrastructure and African-led capacity is critical for the continent. But thank you so much for my time. I've been speaking with Corneille Karekezi there. He's the Group Managing Director and the CEO of the African Reinsurance Corporation.